Thanks so much for listening to In Studio. I'm Jay Daniels. It's a privilege to be with you as we come to you from Uptown in New York City. And we want to introduce you to a vocalist that we've had on our program several times. Her name is Kristen Lee Sargent, the talented vocalist. Back in 2015, put out the album Inside Out. And on February the 15th, we'll be releasing her second, called Smolder. We're actually joined by Kristen live here in studio. Kristen, it's a pleasure to be with you. Hope you're doing well.
Well, now that I'm here.
Well, now, we have been very much impressed with your work. And for those who have been listening to Simply Timeless, we've actually featured some of the cuts from the new album on our February programs. But your last album before that was Inside Out, and it showcased quite a great deal of your personality. And truly, you are a unique artist in that you're able to take songs that we've heard many, many times and transform them into something that is uniquely yours. But of course, your career goes much further back than just 2015. Let's begin the story by talking about some of those early musical influences. How is it that you came to love what we call jazz and pop music?
Well, I grew up in suburban Massachusetts, a town called Manchester by the Sea, and if you are dramatically and musically inclined, musical theater is the thing that's around those areas, not so much jazz music for the most part. So I did a lot of performing on stage, and by that token, got to know a fair amount of the Great American Songbook from doing a lot of work in theater and diving into that music. So I pursued that track until I moved to New York, and then realized I was maybe perhaps more interested in obscurities and songs that were taken from the stage and reinterpreted through jazz than I was in the contemporary theater scene at the time. So that's sort of how I came to love that music. And once I understood some of the great jazz singers and what they were capable of, like Carmen McRae, who is so dramatic and so musically astute, it sort of was irresistible for me. So that's sort of how it came to be.
And you're one of the few jazz vocalists that I know that actually comes from a classically trained background as well, with what you call bel canto singing. Mm-hmm. How has that been an influence upon your work in jazz?
Well, I would say that the technique has served me so well. I've had my longest relationship at all is with my voice teacher, Susan Ormont, who I've been with for more than a decade. And classical vocal training done properly can take you anywhere. Healthy singing gives me the ability to maneuver around illness or vocal issues in a way that I think the untrained singer can't, and it's given me a tremendous amount of range. So that's helped, and as much as it's helped, it's also been something to overcome in some ways, because this kind of vocal training will make you very flexible, and it served me well in theater where I needed to sound like different people, or I needed to suit a character. What I'd had to learn through jazz and through self-study was how to sound like myself. So that took some time.
It makes you kind of vulnerable, putting yourself out there and trying to be something that you may not feel greatly comfortable being. A lot of vocalists, they start out trying to sound like somebody else. Did you ever go through that?
Well, I guess I sort of got that stamp in theater, because the job is to sound like someone else. So, and even in classical training, the job is to sound the way Puccini envisioned you sounding. There was always some platonic ideal of how I wanted to sound that was outside of myself, be it the character or role, or what a composer's intent was. So it wasn't until jazz that I started to, I really had to ask myself what I wanted to sound like. And at that point, although there are singers who've inspired me a great deal, I was interested in finding the way I sounded. So I wasn't directly, I think if you could hear my influences in my singing, then that would be amazing.
And you mentioned moving from near Boston, Massachusetts, here to New York. Now that's quite a move, not just in length, but also lifestyle changes, cultural changes. I mean, this is really a big step for you. What was the motivation for coming down from Boston to New York?
Raw ambition. I think that's probably what brings a lot of people here. Raw ambition is what brought me here, and an attitude that, I had an agenda of things I wanted to accomplish, and this kind of Rocky-like mentality of, I'm going to run around the reservoir and take on the city. And when you come to New York with that attitude, I think the city takes you on instead.
So what did you have to learn very early on when you arrived in New York? I mean, you came with these expectations, and what did you find when you arrived here?
Well, I came thinking, because I had success in Boston, that would immediately translate to New York. Now, that didn't happen, and also I would not have learned where my tribe was had I been living anywhere else. It didn't take long for me to realize that the classical scene wasn't mine. It wasn't for me. And then theatrically, the same thing. So New York will quickly show you who you are, I think. So even though I didn't have at first one big moment of realization of, I want to pursue this other music, by bits and pieces, by my continuing to try to force this notion of myself doing musical theater and getting cast in a chorus in something, and finding that I kept getting put in a different direction, warming up with my bel canto warm-ups in a jazz practice studio and being asked to sing with a big band. I thought at that time it was the craziest thing I'd ever done. And I called my mother after I sat in with this big band and said, well, I'm never doing that again, because I was so hard-headed about where I wanted to go. Now, lo and behold, I end up being the singer for that big band 3 years later, when I started to open my mind up. So I'm glad that the raw ambition got me here, but it would have been nice if I had been able to be slightly less myopic and open my ears and eyes up to what was in store for me, which is so much cooler than what I had in mind when I moved here.
But you only learned that through experience.
That's
no
true.
one can teach it to you, So you released Inside Out from Whaling City Sound back in...
I think it's 16, actually.
2016. Have to talk to my secretary about getting the notes right.
I know.
But so you arrive in New York, you're starting to really get acclimated to the scene, starting to grow in your own way. How did you go from being a newbie in New York to then releasing an album that really, got your name out to quite a few people here in the city and around the region?
It's such an interesting journey. I was lucky that I had started working with David Budway, the pianist who's on that record, when I was still in kind of a theatrical cabaret space. He's such a versatile pianist and can play in virtually any style. So, and he's an incredible, he owns a jazz club now, but really jazz is his home. So I had a long-term collaboration with him that was very fruitful. I had a producer, Susie Reynolds at the time, who said that, an artist such as myself, who wasn't 22, really needed to come out with a statement of who they were when they finally released something. And I took that to heart. And I'd also been messing around with these 1980s arrangements, these pop songs from the 80s. And
Modern English was one of them, yeah.
Yeah, and starting to really explore what it would mean to be very creative with a song. And certainly the Great American Songbook lent itself to some thoughtful arrangement, but I felt much less precious about the pop songs of the 80s. So I got to take some chances there. So what you hear on that record is really the burgeoning of me as an arranger, certainly as an improviser and an interpreter. And I think this next album, Smolder, continues that story in a much more advanced way.
So true. Funny how it seems, always in time, but never in line for dreams. Head over heels and toe to toe, this is the sound of my soul. This is the sound.
We're speaking with Kristen Lee Sargent on In Studio from Simply Timeless. And you mentioned the soon-to-be-released album, Smolder. It's going to be coming out February the 15th from Plastic Sax Records. What really was the initial thought behind this? This is what you might call a concept album, right?
Yeah, it does. It is a concept album, but it kind of came about organically. I just sort of, when I saw the songs that I was singing that I felt passionately about, and I wrote an original called Bomb Burn, which is on the record, which we'll be releasing a music video on the 15th as well.
It's a fantastic track, if I can say so.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And the video is a trip. It's going to be really fun. So but there was one element, a literal element, that kind of tied all the songs together, which was fire. And I knew right away it had to be called Smolder. I didn't know whether there was a U in Smolder or not in the British spelling
Sure.
or not. That was really the only question, but that name came to me right away, and everything kind of fell into place around that. And it's such an evocative word, I think, smolder, because it indicates the beginning or the ending of fire, and it brings to bear, I think, a lot of different thoughts for different people. So depending on how I'm feeling on the day, there's songs like I'm Beginning to See the Light that addresses a newly sparked flame. And then there's some songs like I wrote a song called Afterglow, which has to do with, when the flame has gone.
So we're talking about these songs, and I guess a lot of them you could call torch songs in the literal sense. I mean, would you say that your selection of these songs, did you draw on any personal experience in picking these particular, especially the ones that you wrote, did they draw on any of your own experiences in life with love and love lost?
Of course. And I have not thought about the torch song thing. I can't believe. I thought of every fire pun imaginable, and that has not even crossed my mind. So bravo to you.
Thank you.
Yes, these songs feel deeply, deeply personal. And I think that can be heard on the record. It's certainly felt by me. There's been a bit of a delay in this release coming out. The CD's actually been done for more than a year and a half. And I think that distance is kind of a blessing, because the record feels so personal to share. Having a little bit of distance will make it easier to let it go and bring it to other people who hopefully will take it personally.
Between Inside Out and Smolder, it's only been a period of about 2 years or so between the recordings. Would you say that you've been able to grow as an artist, as a person, as a musician between those two records?
Oh my God, yeah. And I think it can be heard as sort of quantum leaps, I think. This album reflects some growth. It also demanded a lot of growth. For instance, which track? True, the first track on the CD.
Sure.
This is actually the only kind of carryover, in a way, from the Inside Out era, because it's an 80s pop song.
Right, Spandau Ballet.
Mm-hmm. And I entirely re-envisioned my arrangement of it. And one of the things on this record that's special is we have cello. Jody Redditch Ferber is on the record. And I didn't know how to arrange with a cello in mind. I just knew that I could hear it. And that was really an interesting challenge of saying, okay, what does this do? What clef am I writing in? So, what I was hearing demanded I pick up some new skills here. And I think, the biggest addition, it's almost hard for me to believe I have originals on an album that I'm releasing.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I'm a songwriter. So I've been dedicating a lot of time since finishing that to writing songs. And I thought that wasn't my job. I come from the theater tradition where somebody else writes the song, somebody else casts me in a role to sing them, and I just show up. And it turns out my destiny is very different than that. And what I can't find in the catalog of amazing music that we have to pull from as singers now from history, it turns out I can write what I need to sing.
Did you ever do any writing before this? Or is this your first attempt at it?
I've written poetry all throughout the years, and I've certainly, through writing arrangements, I've realized that I have things I want to write that maybe aren't just sung. Getting more harmonically curious and capable has been, expanded my language so much. I don't know, somehow this has all come together where the poetry I'm writing now, I know exactly what to do with it now that it's in a song, and I have enough musical tools to create something that I find more harmonically unique than, just another song that sounds like a Great American Songbook song. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and these two tunes mean so much to me.
You're my balm and my burn. You're the lesson I won't learn.
And there are several recognizable names of composers. We obviously have Duke Ellington, Johnny Hodges on I'm Beginning to See the Light. Lionel Hampton, Sonny Burke, and Johnny Mercer with Midnight Sun. These are legendary tunes. And I want to talk about the musicality of the album, if we could, for just a moment. You mentioned that you try to improvise and that you try to I wouldn't say the word reinvent, but you try to provide a fresh take on some of these songs. You just don't want to do another cover of it. What do you consider to be more or less your direction as far as how do you inject your own personality into these songs, and also with musicality in mind? Is there a threshold whereas, this is what I want to do, but not so much? You see where I'm going with this?
Right, yeah, absolutely. Like, I think those two songs are great examples because, Midnight Sun is probably the most out rendition on the album, in that we start, my whole idea, if I'm captured by a song, then it means I have something to say about it. And for me, that song has always been so weirdly celestial in my mind, and I wanted to capture this idea of, the midnight sun. I think about how in Nordic countries where the sun is always out, and you might have this strange feeling if it's 3 a.m, but the sun's out, and yet there's this feeling of love, and there's this union that's happening in the song. And to me, it was just so much more cosmic than renditions I'd heard before. So I tried to get to that through what I had the musicians doing, and also by being very spare in not repeating any section. I kind of did that with Smoke Gets in Your Eyes too. I don't want to dilute something by repeating it more than is necessary.
True.
It's not a Handel aria. I don't have to sing the entire form again, or I don't have to go from the bridge to the end. So that was really fun, and definitely adventurous. And then with Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, I don't know. I don't think of it as injecting a personality. It just means if I have something to say, or there's something in the song that strikes a chord with me, and it's hard to even describe in that case. I really wanted to, I was thinking about it the other day, that Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is, I guess one of the reasons I must have been drawn to it is that it's a song about love lost, but the singer is so knowing, and it's not just about the love that's no longer there, it's about the naivete that she remembers she had. It's about she laughed at them when they said that that it wasn't going to work out, and lo and behold, it hasn't. And that wry sense of humor is still there, but there's also, we lose more than just the partner we wish we had. We lose the person we were when we were with them.
And one thing that you did as part of your promotion for this album, and I think is just wonderful. We like to have our informal surveys on Simply Timeless, and if we have a theme that revolves around a certain word, we'll ask our listeners, what does this word mean to you? And so you did the same thing with smolder, and there are a number of different opinions, both large and small. What does that word smolder, though, mean to you? Oh,
I think my answer is in the record. But it is fun to hear people's answers. I liked Jay Sawyer, who plays drums on the record. He said the smolder. He said that word's kind of nasty to me, but it's the good kind of nasty. I love that. And Ted Nash has a great answer. It was actually his idea. He's filled with them to ask that question of the band members.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. We talk about some of the players on this album. You mentioned Ted Nash, quite a heavy hitter, not only in New York, but around the world. I don't know if he would agree with the term heavy hitter, but certainly he's been making a great impact upon so many. Jay Sawyer on the drums, Jeb Patton on piano, Cameron Brown on bass, Jody Ferber on cello, and Rogerio Baccato on percussion. Talk about the collaborative effort when you get all these musicians together in a studio. Tell us about how the magic somehow does come together.
Oh, the magic came together in a lot of different ways. Now, the thing about New York is that, there's not time and money are at a scarcity. So these people, you get people like this and you don't have to spend a lot of time working things out. I love the idea of, hearing about rock bands. I liked growing up, they'll be like in a cabin in the woods for 2 weeks, just working out the record. And most of the work, I had to kind of do on my own. And then in the studio, we would really be able to quickly and efficiently decide, is this working? Is this not working? So it was a very intense but efficient process. The whole record was done in one day. I won't do that again with a record like this.
I've done that before, and we won't do that again either.
Oh my Lord! Yeah, it was. That was a long day, but I think it was scheduled out really beautifully. It wasn't an easy record to. Inside Out felt so easy. We did it all in one day, but it just kind of flowed out. The music had been in me for so long. The music here was just as inside me, but I think the whole tenor of the record, there's a lot of difficulty in the music, and the process here it felt that way as well, but very, very rewarding. Just like heartache, you can grow from it. Especially talk about Ted Nash. He plays so beautifully, and his alto flute is one of my favorite things he does. He plays everything beautifully. I was thinking he'd step in to start arranging for the cello at some point, because I was like, I have one of the best arrangers in the world here, but he did not. He knows better. I had to learn it on my own. Yes, exactly.
There you go. Hope he hears that too.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the album coming out February the 15th, and that is, by the time that we get this produced and published, it'll be right around the corner.
Oh.
And that's the day after Valentine's Day. Of course, we've jokingly said it's on Singles Awareness Day.
It's the national holiday.
Yes. Thank you for acknowledging it. But when this album, literally and figuratively, gets into the hands of the people, when someone is done listening to this album, what is it that you want to be the takeaway for them after listening to Smolder?
Well, I hope that this album actually will reward a careful listen and take the listener on a journey. If you are one of those people who listens to a record in its entirety, I think this album does reward that kind of listening. If you don't listen to it all at once, that's fine too. I guess I ended the record with the track "The Best Is Yet to Come." Mm-hmm. So I did want people to feel uplifted and excited at the end of it. But I think it's just like a Rorschach test, especially because it's about flame. There's something mysterious. There's something aching here, but there's also there's some fun stuff. So wherever you're at, I think this record will give you something different. If you just want to be sparked and misbehave and enjoy the beginnings of love's starting, we got some Cole Porter on here. We got some other things, and then if National Singles Day isn't finding you in such a happy place, we got 3 tracks here with your name on them. So
yeah, there you go. And you are going to be doing a number of concerts to feature this release, one in particular coming up in March at Birdland.
Yes, that's the official record release. So on the 15th, if you're following me, and I'm easy to find, or you're on my mailing list, then you'll see the music video to Bomb Burn. So that's the big release on the 15th that I'll get to share with people.
Sure.
So wherever you are, you can see that and hear a slightly edited, shorter version of the song on the video. And then March 26th is the big day at Birdland. We've got a great band, almost the whole group from the record, and that should be great. It's in their theater space, which I think is even better for a singer.
It is a beautifully intimate space, yes.
Yeah, so I want to it'll be the full sextet from the record, and that may not be the easiest thing to take on the road, so come and take advantage and see us.
And how can people find you on the web and through social media?
As long as you spell my name right, it's super easy. So my website's just KristenLeeSargent.com, and if you join my mailing list, it's actually really fun. So even if you aren't in this area, and shows that are in New York or wherever I happen to be playing aren't near you, I have a little web series called Jazz and Juice where I do some interviews inspired by your excellent interviewing skills, and some other things to keep you entertained in addition to the music. So I'd love to have you on there.
Well, we are definitely excited to be a part of this and to help you, and I hope for many happy returns as this release goes forward, and many happy listeners ahead too.
Oh, well, I love talking to you, and thanks for sharing me with your great audience.
Kristen Lee Sargent, our guest on In Studio from Simply Timeless. The album is called Smolder, and it's being released on February the 15th. And you can find more information at KristenLeeSargent.com, or our website, of course, simplytimelessradio.com. Till we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week ahead.
Out of the tree of life, I just picked me a plum. You came along and everything started to hum. Still, it's a real good bet